There's an amber warning in place there. We can see the snow and the
Laura.
wind already. Are you in your element, Laura, as it were, or is it a little bit too much for you?
And you know what? This is the thing. There are two faces of snow, isn't there? There's this picturesque scene, this winter wonderland that for me is very, very exciting. But then there's also the very disruptive side that means people are stranded. There's power outages, schools are closed, it's disruption to parents. But I think it's really important to show both sides of that. And we are here this morning in Buxton, and we actually wanted to be a little further up the road. We came into Recce yesterday, but we have seen significantly more snowfall overnight. This is the road from Buxton all the way to Macclesfield, completely closed. I spoke to some gritter guys, they said it's impassable. The drifts of snow up there are many, many feet, up to half a metre in places. And there's a Cat and Fiddle pub up the road as well, which many people are in there, stuck in there, and that's probably the best place to be right now. But you can see that the snow is still falling. It's gone to forecast, exactly what we were thinking overnight last night here in the Peak District. Like I said, the scenes of winter wonderland, but as we've heard as well, many roads closed, impassable, schools closed, travel disruption. So if you are travelling today, the advice is to check before you travel. But the snow continuing to fall right from northern England through North Wales towards central areas of England as well. And we have another around about, I think, 5 or 6 hours of snowfall before it slowly clears away, and then the rest of the day is looking fine. But it's these strong winds of 40, 50 miles an hour that are causing these drifts in some places of many feet. Like I said, up the road where we wanted to go, there are huge snow drifts. But this, thankfully, is just set to be for this morning. It eases by the afternoon. The outlook for the weekend is of wintry showers in the north. It does stay cold for many areas, particularly across northern areas, but the outlook certainly isn't as disruptive. But we'll have more on the forecast in around about 15 minutes' time.
Breaking news now, just in. The UK economy grew by 0.3% in January. That's according to official figures. However, over the last 3 months as a whole and in the last 12 months, the economy has showed zero growth. But that's the latest figures in from the Office for National Statistics in the last few minutes. The economy grew by 0.3% in January.
Well, I hope it will not be lifted in the first place. I think that Wimbledon last year was the very only and sole institution which showed that there is some moral values above any money equivalent, I would say. And it's not a matter whether Russian athletes and Belarusian athletes will be able to participate under no flag or no nation, or they will sign any waiver, because at the end of the day, it's going to be the same situation as with Sabalenka, which actually openly supports Lukashenko. And then once it happened inside Belarus, it was presented as a great victory of the country and the regime itself.
Sahi, what's it like at the moment for you over there? I know you're on the front line, but can you tell us what the atmosphere is like? And equally, how the Ukrainian people feel about big sporting events, either welcoming Russian or Belarusian players or not having them there? How does that go down?
Well, Kiev, thankfully, is not a front line. We're only being hit by rockets. I've returned to Kiev because I have a close friend which will be buried today. So we feel, of course, strongly as in general as a nation towards what's happening and how Russia is trying to find its way back into civil society. And predominantly, it all looks like, everybody's saying, well, every individual has the right of their own opinion. But then yet we're not talking about opinions and we're not talking about any political stuff. It's just whether killing is okay or not okay. And tennis players cannot answer that question. They cannot. They're just being silent for the whole year long. And for me, it's a bit immoral to be able to step out and just, ride the wave of neutrality.
I mean, I'm sure you're very emotional about having to go to that funeral. Who wouldn't be on any day? And I wonder how hearing that organisations are discussing lifting the ban and the way that they have dealt with that ban, I wonder how it affects directly morale of people there, which we've all applauded and saluted and, thought has been wonderful. How does that affect morale?
Well, it's surprising, I would say. It's not going to demoralize. It's not going to make us stop. The problem here is that Ukraine cannot afford itself to stop fighting, because once we'll be slaughtered, rolled over, cleansed, and disappear. So for us, the no war messages and all that sort, it just doesn't work. And unfortunately, or luckily for all the European people who have not been in Ukraine and they do not understand what's actually going on, that the war is waged not upon the army or the soldiers, it's waged upon the nation. And this is the most ridiculous act of terror what the Russia is doing for the past year.
Yeah.
And yet trying to implement them back into the system of civil society will be a big mistake.
You've just heard firsthand there from Serhiy, who is fighting for his country, about the impact that this has on them and the morale. What are your thoughts for these Russian and Belarusian tennis players and the All England having had this ban, maybe reversing it?
I mean, first and foremost, this is just an incredible, difficult situation. Serhiy, you are doing an amazing job, and hearing your emotion and seeing you, oh my God, my thoughts are with you today and the Ukrainian people. This is not an easy subject at all. And I don't know how we're going to come out of this in a way, and maybe I'm being very naive about it, but when sport and politics mix, you know, as athletes, this is where we just want to, you know, go, we just want to do our sport, you know, we just want to play. And when a country, you can't help where you're born, and when you want to just compete, and then your nation's politics gets caught up with just your sport, then, you know, how do we cross this, you know, how do we solve this problem? Because it is a problem. My view is that the lifting the ban and competing under a neutral flag will hurt those Russian athletes massively. If you told me that I couldn't compete under a British flag, my dream was to compete for my country, to win medals for my country. So I think you're hurting the Russian athletes by not being able to speak about Russia or anything like that. I don't know what the solution is, the ideal solution. There is no ideal solution in this horrible, horrible situation. But all we can try and do is actually promote that sports has a way of showing that, you know, maybe it can bring people together. Maybe, you know, the messages of, you know, no war on the TV cameras can actually show that you know, everyone's an individual, and there are Russians out there that don't support this, and hopefully sport can do that.
And now I want to introduce you to a very inspirational young man who, in fact, is a nominee. And when I met him today, I sort of found myself thinking, I really want this guy to win. He's Oscar, which he's nominated for. Let's take a look at the amazing story of James Martin. He's the Northern Irish actor who could make history this weekend. James Martin is not just on a high after starring in an Oscar-nominated film, but he's also preparing to take his place in the upper echelons of Hollywood.
It's amazing how when you do get nominated for an Oscar, it starts going really well.
Isabel knew from a young age that she'd been born in the wrong body, but attitudes at the time left her unable to imagine a different life.
Now, when she was younger, Isabel worked as a sailor, which took her around the world, even as far as Japan.
She threw herself into physical work and went on to become a firefighter and a truck driver, jobs that she says helped her improve her manliness.
She then met her wife, Margaret, aged 16, just 16, and they were married 5 years later, going on to have 2 children together.
And for 40 years, this was her life, hiding her true self behind closed doors and privately dressing in women's clothes bought for her by her wife.
Until she reached her 70s, when, with Margaret's blessing, Isabel finally started living as a woman, walking taller and prouder than she'd ever done before. Isabel finally completed her transition this year. Goodness me, Isabel. It's an extraordinary story when we read through the details like that, but of course, you've lived it.
Yes.
For many people, why did it take till 80? People might wonder, why put yourself through this at 80?
I had Margaret's support, and obviously when I was younger, when I was 20, they were still imprisoning homosexuals, so the trans people weren't even talked about. I had the support of a wonderful, wonderful wife who I shall have been married to for 60 years. She has Alzheimer's and doesn't really know me now. in a nursing home.
Anybody north of Birmingham will be very concerned about your plans for HS2, won't they, this morning? You shelved it for 2 years. It puts a huge hole in any idea of levelling up, and it's something that was there that people voted for you on to deliver, and you're now going to not do so.
Well, what's been announced is a delay in the delivery of HS2 because in the intervening period of time since the election where we made that commitment, we have been hit with 2 huge events, COVID and Russia's attempted invasion of Ukraine, which have massively put strain on the UK economy. And so when you have circumstances like that, you have to adapt your plans. But our commitment to regional development across the UK is absolutely firm. We have already seen a positive impact from the HS2. There have been literally thousands of jobs that have been created in the West Midlands as a direct result of HS2. We're still absolutely committed to it, but we've got to be realistic. When we had the economic impact of things like COVID and Russia's attempted invasion of Ukraine, we have to deal with the realities. And that has meant that we are going to introduce a small delay in the delivery.
Well, you say small delay. 2 years isn't a small delay to those people who suddenly aren't going to get that extension. But we understand there are extenuating circumstances that you couldn't have foreseen.